Remove her from first class. The words landed harder than the hum of the engines waiting outside Gate B-17. For a brief second, the cabin went silent. Not the peaceful silence of a luxury flight before departure, but the kind that settles over a room when everyone realizes something is wrong and nobody wants to be the first to say it. Monica Hayes stood beside seat 2A, one hand resting lightly on the leather headrest, her boarding pass still visible between her fingers. She was dressed simply in dark jeans, white sneakers, and a black crewneck sweater. No designer logos. No jewelry worth noticing. Nothing that matched the image some people expected when they heard the word successful executive. Nicole Parker, the lead flight attendant, folded her arms and looked Monica up and down for the third time. "Ma'am, I've already explained this. That seat isn't available to you." Monica glanced at the boarding pass and then back at Nicole. "My ticket says otherwise." Her voice was calm, measured, the kind of calm that often irritates people who are looking for an argument. Around them, passengers pretended to scroll through their phones while secretly watching every second. A businessman in the front row lowered his newspaper. A young mother near the aisle stopped helping her son with a game on his tablet. Everyone could feel the tension spreading through the cabin like a storm cloud. Nicole stepped closer. "You need to gather your things and leave this section immediately." Monica didn't move. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't demand a manager. She simply stood there, looking at the woman who seemed determined to decide where she belonged. At 32,000 feet, authority often came from uniforms. But this plane was still on the ground, and the real test of authority was already unfolding. The galley, a younger flight attendant named Emily Ross, looked up from her tablet. Her eyebrows tightened. She had scanned every boarding pass during priority boarding. She remembered Monica's ticket. She remembered the green confirmation screen. But before she could speak, Nicole gestured toward the aisle. "Please step off the aircraft." Monica slowly looked around the cabin. Not angry, not embarrassed, just observant, as if she were memorizing every face and every word. Then she picked up her small carry-on bag. The cabin relaxed slightly, believing the confrontation was over. But as Monica walked toward the exit, something shifted. Emily watched her leave and felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Because for the first time that morning, she was certain of one thing. The wrong passenger had just been removed from first class. Monica Hayes stepped off the aircraft and into the jet bridge without looking back. The door closed behind her with a soft click, but the feeling lingered. Not humiliation, not anger, something colder, familiar. The jet bridge stretched ahead under bright white lights, quiet except for the distant sound of baggage equipment moving somewhere below the terminal. Monica walked calmly, her carry-on rolling behind her. To anyone passing by, she looked like an ordinary traveler whose flight plans had changed. That assumption had followed her for most of her life. Back inside the aircraft, passengers settled into their seats. The tension seemed to dissolve. Nicole Parker returned to the front galley and adjusted her uniform. To her, the problem had been handled. A middle-aged man now occupied seat 2A, the same seat Monica had purchased weeks earlier. He smiled as a flight attendant handed him a bottled water. Around him, conversations slowly resumed. People returned to their screens. Headphones went back on. The cabin tried to move forward. But not everyone had forgotten what happened. Emily Ross remained near the boarding door, holding her tablet. She looked down at the passenger manifest again. Monica Hayes. Seat 2A. First class. Confirmed. There was in plain black letters. No warning flags. No seating issue. No upgrade conflict. Nothing. Emily checked it a second time. Then a third. The answer never changed. Her stomach tightened. Across the cabin, a passenger leaned toward another and quietly asked, "Did she actually have a valid ticket?" The other shrugged. Looked like she did. The uncertainty remained in the air. Meanwhile, Monica entered the terminal and found a quiet seating area overlooking the runway. Large windows framed a line of aircraft preparing for departure beneath a bright morning sky. She sat down and placed her carry-on beside her chair. Then she pulled out her phone. Her expression never changed. She opened her messages and stared at the screen for a moment. Years earlier, situations like this had affected her differently. At 24, being questioned had made her doubt herself. At 29, it made her angry. At 36, it made her determined. Now, at 44, it simply made her observant. She had learned something valuable over the years. The truth always arrived eventually. The question was how much damage people caused before it showed up. Her phone vibrated. A message from her executive assistant appeared almost instantly. "Good morning, Monica. Did you board successfully?" Monica looked through the terminal window toward the aircraft sitting quietly at the gate. Then she typed a short response. "Not exactly." On the plane, boarding was nearly complete. The cabin door closed. Passengers fastened seat belts. Overhead bins clicked shut. Everything appeared ready for departure. Yet Emily could not stop staring at the name on her screen. Monica Hayes. She knew that name. She had seen it before somewhere. A news article. A business magazine. The cover of business magazines sitting in airport bookstores. She had watched an interview months earlier about leadership, innovation, and corporate ethics. The woman who had just been escorted off the aircraft was not confused about her seat. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. A chill ran through Emily as she looked toward the front galley where Nicole Parker was preparing for departure as though nothing unusual had happened. The contrast felt impossible. One woman completely certain she had handled a problem. Another suddenly realizing a serious mistake had just unfolded in front of dozens of witnesses. Emily took a slow breath and walked toward Nicole. "I need to show you something," she said quietly. Nicole barely looked up. "We are preparing for departure. It is about the passenger from seat 2A. Nicole sighed. "That situation is over." Emily lowered her voice. "I do not think it is." For the first time, Nicole looked directly at her. "What is that supposed to mean?" Emily turned her tablet around. Nicole glanced at the screen. Her expression remained unchanged. "The manifest confirms her seat assignment," Emily said. "It always did." Nicole folded her arms. "Passengers make claims all the time. This passenger was not making a claim." Emily hesitated. She was telling the truth. A shadow crossed Nicole's face, but it disappeared almost immediately. "The aircraft is full. The matter is closed." Emily looked around the cabin. The passenger now sitting in 2A appeared perfectly comfortable. A flight attendant offered him a refill. Nearby travelers exchanged occasional glances, clearly remembering what had happened only minutes earlier. The incident might have been over for Nicole, but it was not over for the people who watched it happen. At the gate, the jet bridge had already been disconnected. The aircraft should have been moving soon. Yet something felt unsettled, as though the flight itself knew the story was unfinished. Across the terminal, Monica remained seated near the large windows overlooking the runway. Her phone buzzed again. This time her assistant called directly. Monica answered. "Good morning, Ava. I received your message." Ava said, "Are you all right?" Monica looked toward the aircraft in the distance. "I am fine. Would you like me to contact anyone?" Monica paused. Outside, sunlight reflected off the aircraft's silver fuselage. "Not yet," she replied. "Let us see what happens next." Her calmness surprised even Ava. Most people would have been furious. Monica simply observed. Years had taught her that character revealed itself most clearly when nobody believed they were being watched. Back on the aircraft, the boarding door was closed, the cabin secure, and every procedure complete. Yet the aircraft remained at the gate. Minutes passed. Then another minute. Passengers began looking out the windows. A businessman checked his watch. A woman near the aisle frowned and asked a flight attendant why they had not pushed back. No answer came. Then a notification appeared on a screen inside the cockpit. Captain Ethan Brooks read the message once. Then he read it again. His expression changed instantly. Captain Ethan Brooks stared at the notification on his cockpit display and felt the air change around him. In 21 years of flying commercial aircraft, he had learned to pay attention when certain names appeared in certain places. This was one of those moments. He opened the attached profile and immediately sat back in his seat. The photograph matched the passenger who had been removed from the aircraft less than 20 minutes earlier. Monica Hayes. The information beneath her name stretched across multiple pages. National Business Awards, major corporate partnerships, advisory positions, public leadership initiatives. Ethan recognized her instantly, not because of her wealth, because of her reputation. Monica Hayes was known throughout the business world for one thing above all else: integrity. The captain looked toward the closed cockpit door. Something had gone very wrong outside. Beside him, the first officer noticed his expression. "Everything okay?" Ethan did not answer immediately. He continued reading. Then he opened another message that had arrived seconds earlier from corporate operations. The wording was brief but direct. Review passenger removal from seat 2A. Immediately, Ethan frowned. Corporate operations almost never became involved in routine seating disputes. Yet here they were. Before departure. Before pushback. Before the aircraft had even left the gate. That alone told him the situation was far more serious than anyone realized. He stood from his seat. "I will be right back." Outside the cockpit, passengers were growing restless. Several people had begun checking their watches. Others looked through the windows, wondering why the aircraft remained parked. The man occupying seat 2A shifted uncomfortably as he noticed flight attendants exchanging nervous glances. Emily Ross stood near the galley holding her tablet. She looked up when Ethan approached. "Captain." Ethan lowered his voice. "Tell me exactly what happened." Emily hesitated only briefly. Then she told him everything. The boarding pass. The valid seat assignment. The disagreement. The decision to remove Monica from the aircraft. As she spoke, Ethan's expression hardened. Not with anger, with concern. Every detail made the situation worse. When she finished, he asked one question. Was there any issue with her ticket? Emily shook her head. No, sir. Any issue with identification? No, sir. Any issue with passenger conduct? No, sir. The silence that followed seemed to stretch across the entire front cabin. Ethan thanked her and walked toward Nicole Parker. She smiled confidently as he approached, apparently expecting support. Instead, the captain asked a question that immediately changed the atmosphere. Why was a confirmed first-class passenger removed from this aircraft? Nicole blinked. "Captain, I handled the situation." That was not my question. Her confidence faltered. Around them, nearby passengers quietly listened. Ethan glanced toward seat 2A and then back at Nicole. The pieces no longer fit together. And when the facts stopped matching the story, experience had taught him to trust the facts. Back inside the terminal, Monica's phone rang once more. This time the caller identification displayed an unfamiliar corporate number. She looked at the screen for several seconds before answering. The voice on the other end sounded unusually formal. "Ms. Hayes, this is Horizon Airways Operations. We would like to speak with you regarding your flight." Monica Hayes listened quietly as the representative from Horizon Airways Operations explained that an internal review had begun. The voice on the phone was professional, careful, almost cautious. "Ms. Hayes, we are trying to understand exactly what occurred before departure." Monica looked through the terminal window at the aircraft still sitting motionless at the gate. "I believe your team already knows what happened," she said calmly. On the other end, a brief silence followed. "We are gathering information from multiple sources." Monica nodded, even though nobody could see her. "Then I suggest you speak to the people who were present." She ended the call without raising her voice, without making demands, without mentioning her position, her influence, or the fact that half the business world would recognize her name. Inside the aircraft, the atmosphere continued to shift. Passengers were no longer simply waiting for departure. They were watching, listening, sensing that something unusual was unfolding around them. Captain Ethan Brooks stood near the front galley while Nicole Parker struggled to explain her decision. The problem was not her confidence. The problem was that every answer created another question. "I believe there was an issue with the seat assignment," Nicole said. Ethan looked at her carefully. "Based on what?" Nicole hesitated. The situation felt unusual. Ethan's expression remained unchanged. Unusual is not a policy. Nearby, Emily Ross lowered her eyes toward the manifest again. The facts remained exactly where they had always been. Seat 2A. Confirmed. Paid. Valid. The truth sat quietly on a screen while assumptions had done all the talking. Several rows back, passengers had begun discussing the delay openly. A businessman who had witnessed the removal leaned into the aisle. "The woman had a boarding pass," he said. Another passenger nodded. "I saw it too." A third added, "She never caused any trouble." Their comments spread through the cabin, small observations becoming a larger picture. Piece by piece, the story Nicole had relied upon began falling apart. Then Ethan's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. Another message from corporate operations. This one was shorter than the first. Significantly shorter. It contained only a few words. "Passenger removal under executive review. Hold departure." Ethan read it twice. His jaw tightened. Hold departure. Those two words carried weight. Airlines did not delay flights without reason. Every minute at a gate cost money. Every delay created scheduling problems across an entire network. Yet someone inside corporate operations had decided this situation was important enough to stop everything. Ethan looked through the cabin. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in equipment. Dozens of crew members. More than 100 passengers. And none of them were moving. Because one passenger who should have been on board was sitting alone in the terminal. Back near the window, overlooking the runway, Monica remained calm. Travelers walked past without recognizing her. Announcements echoed through the terminal. Aircraft taxied in the distance beneath the bright afternoon sun. Everything appeared normal. Yet her phone buzzed once again. This time the caller identification displayed a different name. Captain Ethan Brooks. Monica stared at the screen for a moment before answering. The first words she heard were not an explanation. They were not an excuse. They were not a defense. Ms. Hayes, Ethan said carefully, there is a flight waiting for you. Monica Hayes remained silent for a moment after hearing Captain Ethan Brooks speak. Beyond the terminal windows, the aircraft still sat motionless at the gate, surrounded by service vehicles and afternoon sunlight. Travelers moved through the terminal carrying coffee cups and rolling luggage, completely unaware that an entire flight schedule had been interrupted because of a decision made less than an hour earlier. A flight waiting for me? Monica finally asked. Ethan's voice remained steady. Yes, ma'am. Monica glanced toward the aircraft. That is unusual. So is what happened. The honesty in his answer caught her attention. Most people rushed toward excuses when they realized a mistake had been made. Ethan seemed more interested in facts. What changed? Monica asked. Inside the aircraft, Ethan looked through the front cabin. Nicole Parker stood several feet away, speaking quietly with another crew member. Passengers continued watching every movement near the galley. The atmosphere felt less like a flight and more like a courtroom waiting for a verdict. The truth caught up with the situation, Ethan replied. Monica allowed herself the faintest smile. The truth usually does. Back in the cabin, word of the delay had spread through nearly every row. Passengers exchanged theories. Some assumed there was a maintenance issue. Others suspected weather. But those who had witnessed the earlier confrontation knew better. A businessman near the bulkhead leaned across the aisle and whispered, "This is about that woman, isn't it?" The passenger beside him nodded. "It has to be." Near the front, Emily Ross stood quietly holding her tablet. She remembered the moment she first recognized Monica's name. The memory still unsettled her. One assumption, one decision, one person deciding who looked like they belonged. And now an entire aircraft sat frozen because of it. Ethan ended his call and stepped into the aisle. Every eye near the front cabin followed him. Even the passenger occupying seat 2A looked up from his phone. The captain's expression was calm, but there was a seriousness behind it that immediately commanded attention. He turned toward Nicole. How long ago was the passenger removed? Nicole hesitated. Approximately 25 minutes. Ethan nodded slowly. And during those 25 minutes, nobody thought to verify the information. No one answered. The silence felt heavier than any response. Back in the terminal, Monica's phone vibrated again. This time it was her assistant, Ava. Corporate operations just contacted our office, Ava said. They are escalating the matter internally. Monica looked toward the aircraft once more. I expected they would. Do you want me to intervene? Ava asked. Monica shook her head, even though Ava could not see it. No. Let them decide who they want to be. The answer reflected something she had learned years earlier. Character was revealed most clearly when people believed nobody important was watching. On the aircraft, Ethan stepped toward the public address handset. Conversations throughout the cabin gradually faded. Passengers looked up from phones, tablets, and laptops. Even the flight attendants stopped moving. Then Ethan made an announcement that instantly changed everything. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the aircraft. This flight will remain at the gate until a passenger who was incorrectly removed is given the opportunity to return. The silence that followed was immediate, absolute, and somewhere near the middle of the cabin, someone quietly asked the question everyone else was thinking. Who exactly is she? The question drifted through the cabin like a spark looking for dry wood. Who exactly is she? No one answered immediately. Yet something had already changed. 20 minutes earlier, Monica Hayes had been treated like a problem. Now an entire aircraft was waiting for her return. Passengers exchanged curious looks. Some opened search engines on their phones. Others replayed the morning in their minds. The simple clothes. The calm voice. The boarding pass she kept showing. The The complete lack of anger when she was asked to leave. Piece by piece, the picture started forming. Near the front galley, Nicole Parker felt the attention shifting toward her. It was subtle at first. A glance here, a whisper there, but she could feel it. The confidence she had carried earlier was beginning to slip away. Emily Ross stood quietly beside the manifest terminal. She knew the truth could not stay hidden much longer. The name alone was enough. Monica Hayes was not simply a successful executive. She was one of the most respected leaders in American business. Thousands of employees worked for companies she had built. Universities invited her to speak. Major corporations sought her advice. Yet none of that was what bothered Emily most. What bothered her was how little any of it should have mattered. A valid ticket should have been enough. A confirmed seat should have been enough. Respect should have required nothing more. In the terminal, Monica finally stood from her chair. The call from Captain Ethan Brooks remained fresh in her mind. There had been sincerity in his voice. Accountability. Qualities she respected. Through the giant windows, she could still see the aircraft parked exactly where it had been before. Waiting. Her phone buzzed again. A message this time. Horizon Airways Executive Operations. We sincerely request your return to the aircraft. Monica read it once and slipped the phone back into her pocket. She picked up her carry-on and began walking toward the gate. Her pace never changed. Calm, steady, unhurried. Back on board, Ethan stepped into the aisle once more. The cabin had become unusually quiet. Even the passengers who had been frustrated by the delay now seemed invested in the outcome. Ethan looked toward seat 2A, then toward the closed boarding door. Finally he spoke. For clarity, he said, loud enough for the front cabin to hear. The passenger removed from this flight held a valid ticket, a valid seat assignment, and complied with all instructions. The statement landed heavily. Nicole lowered her eyes. No explanation followed. None could erase the facts. A passenger near the window slowly shook his head. So she was right the whole time. No one disagreed. Then another passenger looked up from his phone. His eyes widened. Wait a second, he said quietly. Monica Hayes? Several heads turned. You know who she is? Someone asked. The passenger stared at the screen in disbelief. Everybody in business knows who she is. The whisper spread row by row. Faster than any announcement. Faster than any apology. And just beyond the boarding door, footsteps were approaching. The boarding door opened, and the cabin seemed to inhale all at once. Conversation stopped. Phones lowered. Eyes turned toward the front entrance. Monica Hayes stepped back onto the aircraft carrying the same small bag she had carried when she first boarded. The difference was not her appearance. It was the atmosphere around her. Earlier, people had looked at her with doubt. Now they looked at her with recognition. Respect moved through the cabin like a wave. Monica walked forward at an unhurried pace, her expression calm, her posture unchanged. She was not returning to prove anything. The facts had already done that. Captain Ethan Brooks stood near the front galley waiting for her arrival. As she approached, he offered a professional nod. Ms. Hayes, he said, thank you for returning. Monica acknowledged him with a small smile. Thank you for making the call. The simplicity of the exchange carried more weight than any speech could have. Nearby, Emily Ross felt relief wash over her. For the first time since boarding began, the situation felt like it was moving toward the truth instead of away from it. Several passengers watched silently as Monica continued toward seat 2A. The man occupying the seat stood immediately. His face showed embarrassment. I am sorry, he said. I did not know. Monica's response was gentle. Neither did I. A few passengers smiled. Others looked down, reflecting on everything they had witnessed. The man stepped aside, and Monica reclaimed the seat she had purchased weeks earlier. No drama. No argument. Just a simple correction of something that should never have happened. Yet the significance reached far beyond one seat. Ethan remained standing near the aisle. He looked across the first-class cabin before speaking clearly enough for nearby passengers and crew to hear. Toward him. Yes. The man smiled awkwardly. I just wanted to say that the way you handled all of this was impressive. Monica considered the comment for a moment. Then she replied softly. The goal is not to win an argument. The goal is to leave the truth standing when the argument is over. Several passengers nodded. Even those who had never heard her name before seemed to understand. And as the cabin settled into a new silence, messages continued moving through Horizon Airways corporate offices, carrying details of the incident far beyond the walls of a single aircraft. As the aircraft finally pushed back from the gate, a sense of closure settled across the cabin. The delay that had frustrated so many passengers only minutes earlier now felt different. It felt necessary. It felt like the price that had to be paid for truth to catch up with assumption. Outside the windows, the airport moved with its usual rhythm. Service vehicles crossed the tarmac. Aircraft lined up for departure. Ground crews completed their tasks beneath the fading afternoon light. The world continued forward. Yet inside this cabin, something important had already happened. People had witnessed more than a travel delay. They had witnessed the cost of assumptions and the value of accountability. More importantly, they had witnessed how easily confidence can masquerade as certainty when facts are ignored. Monica Hayes sat quietly in seat 2A, looking out at the runway. She did not check social media. She did not make phone calls. She did not celebrate being proven right. Her attention remained fixed on the horizon beyond the glass. The calmness in her posture was striking. Many people would have used the moment to draw attention to themselves. Monica seemed determined to do the opposite. Across the aisle, passengers occasionally glanced in her direction. Some recognized her name. Others only knew her as the woman who had been treated unfairly and returned with dignity intact. In many ways, that was enough. To them, her title mattered far less than the composure she had demonstrated when given every reason to react differently. Near the front galley, Emily Ross felt a quiet sense of relief. The truth had prevailed, but not because someone powerful demanded it. The truth prevailed because facts existed whether people acknowledged them or not. She replayed the events in her mind and realized how easily things could have gone another way had nobody paused long enough to verify what was actually true. She promised herself she would remember that lesson long after this flight ended. Nicole Parker remained unusually silent. The confidence that had guided her earlier decisions had been replaced by reflection. She stared at a document open on her tablet without really reading it. Corporate operations had already begun reviewing the incident. Questions would be asked. Procedures would be examined. Reports would be written. Meetings would follow. But for Monica, that was no longer the point. Consequences belonged to the people responsible for creating them. Her focus was elsewhere. She was already thinking beyond the incident itself. Several minutes later, Captain Ethan Brooks stepped into the cabin before returning to the cockpit. As he passed seat 2A, he paused briefly. "Thank you again for coming back," he said. Monica looked up and smiled. "Thank you for choosing facts over convenience." Ethan nodded once. Then he continued forward. The exchange lasted only seconds, yet many passengers remembered it long afterward. Because respect often sounds simple when it is genuine. There was no performance in the conversation. No audience being addressed. Just two people acknowledging a choice that should have been obvious from the beginning. As the aircraft climbed above the clouds, sunlight filled the cabin with a warm glow. Golden light spilled across tray tables, seatbacks, and windows. The tension that had defined the morning finally faded. Conversations returned. Laptops opened. Coffee cups appeared on tray tables. Flight attendants resumed normal service. Life resumed, but not exactly as it had before. Something subtle had changed. The businessman who had spoken with Monica earlier leaned back in his seat and reflected on what he had seen. One assumption had nearly erased the truth. One decision had nearly convinced an entire cabin that someone did not belong. And all along, the facts had been sitting there waiting to be noticed. Nearby, another passenger quietly removed her headphones and stared out the window, thinking about how often people form conclusions before asking questions. The lesson extended far beyond airports and airplanes. Monica closed her eyes for a moment and remembered something she had learned years ago. Titles can command attention. Wealth can open doors. Success can create influence. But none of those things should be required for basic respect. If dignity only appears after status is revealed, then it is not dignity at all. It is calculation. When she finally looked out the window again, the clouds stretched endlessly beneath the aircraft like a white ocean. Calm, quiet, unbroken. The scene felt symbolic somehow. Storms existed below, but above them there was clarity. Then she spoke one final sentence, softly enough that only a few nearby passengers heard it. "I did not need people to know who I was. I only needed them to remember who they were supposed to be." No one responded immediately. They did not need to. The lesson had already landed. It had landed more effectively than any corporate memo, training session, or public apology ever could. Because people rarely remember policies. They remember moments. And this had become one of those moments. As the aircraft continued westward through the evening sky, passengers gradually returned to their routines, but many carried something with them that had not been there when they boarded. Reflection, perspective, awareness. Somewhere far below, on the ground they had left behind, a mistake had become a reminder that dignity should never depend on appearance, assumptions, or status. It should simply be given, because every person deserves it the moment they walk through the door. And long after the flight landed and the details faded from memory, what many passengers would remember most was not who Monica Hayes turned out to be. It was who people chose to be before they knew.